Our federal government has given us plenty of reasons not to trust them, especially as we get close to a major presidential election. The intel communities have worked together to push forward one candidate, which is usually always a Democrat, and, well, they'll spew up any lies and put out any type of propaganda to make sure their selected candidate is more favorable amongst the American people, which includes lying and hooking up fake documents and deceiving the American people. So that's why last week, when an indictment came down from the Department of Injustice regarding Tenet Media, I was extremely alarmed because it reminds me of things that have happened in the past and the reasons why we can't keep trusting these same characters. So specifically, many of you guys know last week, Tenet Media was a part of an indictment involving 2 Russian nationals. Now, Tenet Media is a group that's owned by Lauren Chen and her husband. Now, Lauren Chen is Canadian, and so again, keep that in mind as we keep going through the story, that this indictment is specifically doesn't name Tenet Media as the defendants, but it goes after 2 Russian nationals. Now, those 2 Russian nationals have not been arrested yet. In fact, the DOJ, I reached out to them today, says that they're still at large. There hasn't been an arrest made. So I specifically asked, DHS and the DOJ, when was the last time these 2 defendants were in the U.S.? Because that's critical, folks, because time and time again, they always name these Russian characters who they're going after. But are you really going to be able to go after and arrest them if they've never been to the United States? I want to know if they've been to the U.S., when they've been to the U.S. When was the last time they were here in this country? Now, the DOJ won't answer those questions. Of course, I've asked. Neither will DHS because they have their records, obviously, being the fact that they're not Americans. And so nobody wants to tell me when these 2 individuals have been in the U.S. Ultimately, what does that mean, folks? Well, this would be a bunch of BS, this indictment, if these 2 people have not been into the United States in quite some time, if they have really no linkage to the U.S. besides communicating with individuals who live here. Okay? So again, this whole indictment might be a bunch of garbage, but is it really garbage? Because this is why. This indictment walks you through the internal communications of what was going on behind the scenes over at Tenet Media and Russia Today. Now, obviously, Russia Today is a Russian state media outlet. Okay, so they obviously are pushing propaganda from their government like our government does with corporate media outlets, but they don't tell the American people that, of course. But interesting, they know of all the internal communications and they detail it for you in this indictment. Now, how would our federal government know specifically the behind the scenes communications that were going on? Well, there's 2 theories that I've tested out here, okay? And I've been talking with a lot of experts, people who formerly have worked for the DOJ, criminal defense attorneys, people with experience here. And these are the only 2 theories we have running for us. Number 1, before the indictment came down, if the FBI had a warrant to obtain Lauren or her husband's devices, they could have made a forensic copy of it. Theory 2? Well, my second theory in all of this happens to do with something called FISA. Many of you guys remember House Republicans kneeled and allowed the Biden regime to just renew it, really no limitations. So the U.S. government is able to spy on Americans without any warrants. It's warrantless spying, and it's legal because, well, people like Mike Johnson really have no spine, and they didn't push back when they were allowed to do it. And so we allow continuously our federal government to spy on Americans without warrants. Thanks, Mike Johnson. As many of you guys know, I've been pushing back. His office doesn't want to answer any questions in regard to that, but that's a whole nother story that we've done previously. So my question is here, okay? How was the U.S. government able to obtain these internal communications? And it's deeply concerning given the fact that this involves journalists. Okay, journalists who did not know Lauren Chen was taking money from Russia, allegedly. And now these journalists have their communications at the hands of the federal government. Now we know based on, Barack Obama that he had no problem going after journalists because he wanted to find out who their sources were. So people like Associated Press journalists, people like Fox News' James Rosen, Cheryl Atkinson, who was at CBS News at the time, we spoke with her last week about this, were spied on illegally by the Obama regime. And they got away with it. So now, is the federal government using these 2 so-called Russian nationals to possibly use FISA to spy on American journalists? Well, it's a serious question that needs answering, and I keep asking these questions. Nobody wants to talk about it, of course. I've reached out to individuals close to Lauren Chen, and they have not yet given me any details as to how the federal government obtained these communications. I will keep trying, but we need to know because, again, several journalists are being looped into all of this. And why is it important? Well, we saw what they did to General Flynn. We saw how our federal government pretended like General Flynn lied and went after him and prosecuted him. So when people like Tim Pool come out and say that I'm going to cooperate with this investigation, I'm deeply concerned that they may be walking themselves into what could potentially be a setup. Now, I've asked several DOJ officials, former DOJ officials, about all of this, and they've read through the indictment, and they truly do also believe that these two theories are the only ones possible, and they're actually strongly leaning towards the FISA side of all of this. So again, we really need to figure out whether or not our government is surveilling journalists right now, because it's very, very likely that they are, because there was no pushback when Barack Obama did it because he didn't like the coverage that he was getting. And so he wanted to find out who their sources were. And so he got the phone records and spied and hacked into people like Cheryl Atkinson's devices. And he got away with it. Now, Cheryl Atkinson has obviously been fighting this for over 11 years. But again, she shouldn't have to, because we have something called the U.S. Constitution, which protects journalists from the federal government. But they're always finding ways to go around the Constitution, and FISA does just that. Now, again, the bar is extremely, extremely low for the government when it comes to being able to spy on those who might have ties to Lauren Chen, who is a Canadian. So again, this is all deeply concerning, and nobody wants to answer these questions, of course. There's really no way to figure out if our government used FISA against American journalists to spy on what they're working on, spy on what their discussions are. And it doesn't really tell us how deep all of this goes. Again, this indictment looks like BS. And so you at home right now should be deeply concerned that the Biden-Harris administration, the DOJ, is again going after conservative libertarians and trying to target them. Maybe they're just trying to find other crimes that they might be guilty of, because there's so many laws in the books, they could pin anything on you guys. Okay, keep that in mind. If they want to cook up a criminal case against anyone, they can do it, because likely there's a law in the book that you probably haven't seen before, you probably haven't heard of before, that they're going to bring back from the archives and come after people that they don't like. They're notorious for just that. So keep paying attention. I'm going to keep digging into this story because I think it's very, very intriguing that yet again we continue to find these Russian nationalists being named as defendants when our DOJ knows likely they can't even make the arrest because these individuals will not be in the United States anytime soon and likely have never been in the United States. Now, again, I'll keep asking the questions that nobody wants to answer, but that's why you tune into this show. If you're a fan of my work, I greatly appreciate it, of course, because it's very, very hard to work in the independent world. As many of you guys know, I left the corporate media world and have since brought my talents forward without any of the influence of the corporate media hacks, corrupt companies. And it's only possible because of viewers like you. And I don't say that because I want to sound like PBS, of course. But seriously, this show is only possible because of people like you at home right now who are watching and want to keep it up and running. And literally, you guys are the source of income when it comes to pushing this show and hiring staff and keeping us up. So if you'd like to support my work as an independent journalist, we've set up this platform for you. It's supportbre.com. That's support, BRE.com. You can make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor. And again, folks, you guys are the ones who are sponsoring and funding this show. Not any corrupt countries, not any corrupt corporations. It's literally you, and we rely on you strongly. So if you'd like to support my work as an independent journalist, please head on over to supportbre.com. You can make a one-time donation or become a monthly donor, and we greatly appreciate your donations.